Charles Darwin was born in 1809 to a well-to-do English family that lived in an estate in the English countryside they called the Mount. He thought about becoming a doctor like his father and grandfather, but Charles found he was not really interested in medicine. What he really enjoyed was tramping around the woods, hunting and collecting beetles. These were hobbies common to English upper-class gentlemen, but Charles was more enthusiastic about exploring and collecting than most.
At 10 years old, I almost made up my mind to begin collecting all the insects which I could find dead. For on consulting my sister, I concluded that it was not right to kill insects for the sake of making a collection. I took much pleasure in watching the habits of birds and even made notes on the subject. In my simplicity, I remember wondering why every gentleman did not become an ornithologist.
Though Charles entered Edinburgh University at age 16 to study medicine, he spent much of his time in long explorations of the seaside, where he collected and studied varied forms of life, from sponges and small fish to shellfish and birds. And as he explored the life forms he found, whether beetling in the English countryside or collecting sponges along the Scottish seaside, Darwin marveled at the rich variety there was in life on Earth. Curiosity about plants and animals may have come naturally to Darwin. His own grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, had written a book that attempted to explain why the world seemed covered with so many varieties of life. In Zoonomia, Erasmus Darwin argued that life on Earth had formed through slow and ongoing changes passed down through generations over time that could, eventually, change one type of plant or animal into a new type or species. This was a pretty radical idea at the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th, but Erasmus Darwin was not the only one who thought life forms changed over time. The French zoologist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck thought life forms could change to better survive in the environment where they lived. He developed a theory of use and disuse to explain how this might work. An animal that didn't need a trait to survive would eventually lose it because it did not use it. On the other hand, a giraffe that needed a longer neck to eat the leaves of tall trees might use its neck to try to reach for the leaves, and by using it, would actually stretch it. Each generation of giraffes would stretch a little bit more and pass its longer neck on to its children. Over time, Lamarck argued, the stretching giraffes do in each generation would continue to increase until all giraffes had necks long enough to reach the leaves. In France, ideas like Lamarck's were gaining some measure of acceptance. After all, France had gone through a revolutionary overthrow of the king at the end of the 1700s, which also reduced the power of the church, the main opponent to the idea that plant and animal species develop over time. But in England in the early 1800s, the social and political climate was more conservative, and most people accepted traditional church teaching that God created all life on Earth, and that only God could create new forms of life. That's exactly what Charles Darwin believed. He realized that horse breeders could improve the speed of horses over time, or dog breeders could develop new varieties of dog, but these were merely variations of the basic horse or dog that God had created. Darwin did not believe that a horse or a dog could change itself into a whole new species of animal. And so, while Darwin marveled at the variety of life he found at the Scottish seaside or the English countryside, he accepted church teaching that all variety of life came directly from the hand of God. And, after a year at Edinburgh, he decided to drop medicine and instead pursue a classic education at Cambridge University to prepare for a life as a country parson, a job that would give him plenty of time to walk the countryside studying nature.